Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Eyes Wide Open, Through Life and Death, out November 12 on Rising Empire. This album has 12 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's 4th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish melodic metal band. This is a record that starts with an intro, finishes with an outro. I like this design, I like this setup. It gives the record a little bit of boundaries, and it makes the overall structure of the album a little bit more complete. In between, you have a record that's both dynamic and balanced. It's dynamic because it has constant ebbs and flows from beginning to the end. This makes the record feel more dynamic, it gives more movement to the album, and allows the listener to always constantly have to readjust itself for what's coming around the corner. It is also balanced because you start to see some patterns evolve, and you start to see those patterns moving from the first half of the album into the second half of the album. Now this takes a little bit away from the listener because the album that is not as explosive as it could have been, and it becomes a little bit repetitive, or at least you have a sense that you've heard this sort of approach before. Even though the songs don't sound the same, the style of tracks and in the order in which they're coming starts to become familiar to the listener. So this could have been changed by moving a couple of tracks around, or by including some songs that break the mold, that sound nothing like anything that you can find on this record. That would create a clear break within the album. It would give the record more of a sense of overall construction being more robust. It would allow the overall palette of this record to be wider and make the overall dynamics of the record even more engaging for the listener. It's not the case. It doesn't take a lot away from the playability of the album, but it doesn't affect it ever so slightly. Once you get into the soundscape, this is a melodic metal band, so you're going to get a melodic album. But what does that mean? Well, in my opinion, it means that they merge two different genres together. You have a little bit of metalcore here, but you also have a little bit of melodic death metal present. When you bring these two genres together, there are a lot of similarities within them, but there are also a lot of differences. I feel like they took all the good things that those two genres have to offer, and they bring them to the table in order to create their own sound, their own experience. You obviously, listening to this album, you're going to feel those influences coming in, and you can feel like there's certain bands that really pull heavy strings as far as the soundscape on this record goes. Bands like Syra, bands like In Flames definitely have a huge presence on how the overall image of this record comes across to the listener, specifically if you're not familiar with this band, but you're familiar with those two bands. I like the sound of this record because it feels rich, it feels powerful, it's not overwhelming, and it's really well defined. You can hear all the different elements, and the perfect example of that is the bass. The bass really pops on this record without being super noticeable on any given track, but you can feel it and you can hear it. And working with the drums together, they really ground this album. They create a bass line that's really important for the guitars, which perhaps are the most dynamic element, to move and weave in and out of these tracks depending on what the song calls for as far as heaviness or melody. So the job of the bass and drums together, while secondary at first glance, has a very important role in the overall soundscape and in the quality of sound that you're going to get from this record. Like I said, the guitar's super dynamic, always moving, always weaving. While this album is walking in between those two genres of metalcore and melodic death metal, the guitars do not walk that middle ground. The guitars actually weave between the two, sometimes bringing some metalcore elements into the picture, sometimes bringing some melodic death metal elements into the picture, making the record feel a lot more alive, a lot more dynamic, and this works really well also for the lyrical content. This is an album that has very impactful lyrics that have meaning, that feel like they're coming from a deep place within the band. When you have lyrical content like that, you want the sound to be the pure image of what those lyrics are telling you, and that's exactly what's going to happen when you listen to this album. You feel like the music becomes the soundtrack of what you're listening to. That is an important symbiosis that needs to exist on a record that has this sort of fine line between two genres, creating their own DNA, creating their own drive. The guitar solos are outstanding. That is something that really surprised me. I was expecting the album to have some good solos, but I was not expecting the album to be as consistent as far as the solos goes as this record is from top all the way to the bottom. Sure, there are some that are better than others, but I always felt like the solo, regardless of the length and style and approach, it added value to the song. It was not just there because it was expected to be there. It was there because the song needed it, and it added something to it that it didn't have before. Once it gets into the vocals, the mixture of harsh and clean vocals add a lot of life. It added a lot of substance to this album. They also work a little bit as a counterbalance between one and the other. And that is also important because you have the clean vocals coming in and soothing things over, allowing the album to have that melodic nature. Even though sometimes the tracks are heavier musically, the vocals being clean changes a little bit of the perception that you have of the track. And the same could be said about the harsh vocals. Sometimes you have a song that's very melodically driven, but adding harsh vocals into the mix makes the song automatically feel more aggressive. So having these two allows the record to have a little bit of a larger life. It allows the songs, even musically, if they're not as dynamic as they could have been, the tracks still feel very dynamic because of the vocal changes. The constant movement makes your perception of those tracks be ones that have a lot of life to give. So I like the ability of having these two different styles coming together, working one off of the other, and allowing the songs to kind of dictate which one you're going to go with, and then going exactly where they need to go. Overall, this is a very strong record, a record that has great songs, hooky tracks, super catchy, some of them. I like the melodic nature of the album, but I really feel like this is a record that could have used one or two more songs like Echoes, and we're going to talk about Echoes just in a minute. But that to me is the heaviest track on the album. And the reason I say this is not because I'm addicted to heavy songs and I want some heavy tracks, otherwise I'm not going to enjoy the record. That's not the case at all. This is an album that has a lot of movement, that's dynamic, like I said earlier. But a lot of these songs use some of the same elements. So while still being dynamic, is an album that has a lot of the same elements coming at you, song in, song out. Sure, there are some tracks that have more of a melodic tone, almost going into melancholic, really dark and somber, but overall, most of the tracks have a little bit of an upbeat vibe to them. Having one or two heavier tracks that break the mold from everything else that is happening would make this album overall feel more impactful, because it would completely reset the mind of the listener before engaging with tracks that have a lot of similarities between them. So to me, that's the only difference, or the only thing I would change about this record. But overall, the album is super interesting, a lot of fun to listen to, a record that I enjoy going from beginning to end and then pressing play and going at it again. As far as favorite songs are concerned, we'll get into Echoes, but we're going to start off with Fallout. Driven with aggression, the vocals really pack most of the aggression that this track have. This allows the verses to be a little bit more punchy, because the way the vocals come in with the sound of the guitars and drums make those verses feel a little bit more impactful. Once it gets into the chorus, the song shifts more into a melodic approach, both musically and vocally. It has some layers as well in the chorus as far as the vocals are concerned. This allows the vocals to have volume but not necessarily feel heavy. So it's a nice way of giving you a change from what's happening in the verses, but not completely break away from it, and not necessarily have to go back and use the same element that the verses had in the chorus. So you're able to change things, but still keep that thickness of sound alive and well from verses into chorus by adding layers to the vocal lines in the chorus. I really like that aspect of it. This track also has a very nice solo. It's not extended, it's not really big, but it adds a little bit of flair on a song that has a very traditional structure to it. You get versus, chorus, solo, chorus, song is over. So having that solo there kind of allows the song to feel slightly more complete. It completes the puzzle, if you will, as far as this track goes. Next we have Wildfire, my favorite song on the album. Super catchy, super hooky. It has heaviness, it has aggression, it has melody. It has pretty much everything that you want on a track. And when you look at a band like Eyes Wide Open, and when you look at a record like this, Wildfire is kind of a song that paints the picture of what this whole record is all about, mixing these different genres together, bringing melody and aggression and intensity together in order to create a song that's very dynamic, that's very lively, that really moves well. The harsh vocals on this track add to the overall heaviness that the song has, allowing the verses to feel really big. They really feel powerful, they really feel thick. The sound of guitars, drums together with those harsh vocals make this big wall of sound. The drums then in the chorus become even bigger. That was something that I was not expecting. I was expecting the sound to kind of ease off and the song to become a little bit more melodic. It became more melodic vocally, but sound-wise, the drums become even heavier. So that was a nice little change. It worked really well. It made that chorus pop musically, because then vocally, it's super hooky, super catchy. So that's popping already as it is. The guitar solo on this track is outstanding. It's extended, it's a little bit more elaborate. It brings a little bit of the two worlds of this song. It brings a little bit of the explosion of the heaviness with also the melodic drive that the track has. That makes the song feel super complete and allows this song to be an absolute banger from beginning all the way to the end. Last but not least, Echoes. I mentioned this song earlier. This is without a shadow of a doubt the heaviest track on the album. The drums pack so much power in this song. The guitars move in between the melodic side and then the more chunky side. When they become a little bit chunkier, the song just feels like just so big. When they go into a more melodic drive, the song feels like it's picking up so much speed, but it's always heavy regardless of which drive or which element the guitars are adding to the way the sound comes across. The song just feels heavy, just sounds heavy, just moves heavily. The verses are perhaps heavier than the chorus. The chorus almost feels like a little bit of a break. It pumps the tires ever so slightly. It allows the track to ease off, but it doesn't take anything away from the overall sense of heaviness that this song has. It's dynamic, it moves well. The solo also completes it, and like I said, even those breaks in the chorus is just not enough. When you get to the end of this track, you just feel like you've listened to the heaviest song on the album. This is it, Eyes Wide Open, Through Life and Death. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.